So I want to reset your ideas about evolution a little bit. As Darwin himself realized, there's a lot more to evolution than survival of the fittest. There's also reproduction of the most creative. Consider the Vogelkop bowerbird, for example, that lives in New Guinea. He's a little bowerbird about 25 centimeters long, but to attract a mate, he builds a large, complex, radially symmetric bower. If a human built a bower with relative size, we would be making a 15-meter bower, 20 meters wide, and doing it without hands, which is really hard. He also decorates the bower in front with a wide variety of shells, feathers, berries, etc. And each different bowerbird has different aesthetic tastes, different ways of decorating the bower in front and inside. He also has a large repertoire of songs that he uses to attract mates. And he's a very good mimic. So he can mimic other bowerbirds, other birds in the forest, even deer, bush pigs, humans, human biologists using recording equipment. He can imitate all of that. So he's an excellent architect, artist, singer, and even comic, if you consider the mimicry comic. What the female does is she flies around in the forest and she inspects the bowers. In fact, she tests them structurally. She tries to pull them apart to see if they stay together. And she'll fly back to the bower and the bowerbird she most is attracted to, and she'll mate with him. Then she'll go off and create her own inconspicuous bower off in the forest somewhere that's harder for predators to find, lay her eggs, raise her chicks with no help from the male. He's just the sort of Picasso in this role. So, people often say evolution is not driven by intelligent choice. Well, it is in this case. It's driven by the intelligent choices of the female bowerbirds. And that's a very typical pattern in evolution, that female choice and often male choice drives the evolution of these ornamental traits and these ornamental behaviors. And we now have good evidence from biologists that within bowerbirds, for example, brain size in bowerbirds predicts the bower complexity across species. So the very clever Vogelkop bowerbird has a brain about 20% larger than the not very clever tooth-billed catbird. And one reason is the Vogelkop builds this very elaborate bower. The catbird just sort of clears a little area in the forest, puts a few leaves on it, calls it a day. That's good enough. Also, there's evidence that intelligence and vocal mimicry ability predict sexual attractiveness in bowerbirds. So the females are choosing for that vocal mimicry. And intelligence you can actually measure in the bowerbirds in terms of giving them a bunch of different problem-solving tasks and measuring them. So just like you can measure intelligence in humans, you can do that in bowerbirds. A similar pattern exists in songbirds, where intelligence there predicts song repertoire size, how many different songs a bird will sing during courtship. The more songs, the more attractive the male is. That's true for song sparrows, for zebra finches, for mockingbirds. And some birds, like the brown thrasher that lives Texas through Georgia in the southeastern US, has evolved an incredible song repertoire, at least 2,000 distinct songs. And these have no function other than attracting mates. That's their function. So we have good examples that mate choice alone can drive the evolution of brain size, intelligence, complex behaviors. Are humans bright enough to have done that in our evolution? Or is this restricted just to birds that have 1 cubic centimeter brains? I think our ancestors were bright enough to choose mates, both male mates and female mates, for a lot of these ornamental mental traits. And I've argued for the last 20 years in books like The Mating Mind and Mating Intelligence and Spent that this was a major factor in human mental evolution, particularly for ornamental traits that don't seem that useful in survival. Things like art, music, poetry, and humor. 3 empirical questions arise, though. For this evolution to happen, you need variation in the quality of the traits, like different bowerbirds constructing different kinds of bowers, and the variation has to be heritable. That is, differences between individuals have to be caused to some degree by differences in their genes. The second thing you need is mate choice for the traits. So you need males and/or females caring about these traits when they're actually doing the choices, doing courtship, sexually interacting. Third, this is a technical condition. It comes up from game theory, it comes from biology. It's called the costly signaling condition. The traits that evolve, like language ability or artistic ability, have to reveal good genes, genetic quality, general fitness, the propensity to survive and reproduce successfully. If the traits don't reveal good genes, then eventually mate choice, the mate preferences, will stop caring about those traits, and they'll move on to some other traits that are more informative. So, is it plausible that traits like musical ability or art could be heritable? At first glance, that seems like an outrageous and counterintuitive claim. But remember that all of those traits depend on general intelligence. And intelligence, according to the best behavior genetics estimates, is 80% heritable in adults. There are dozens of papers showing that. The heritability in children is only about 50%. But adult intelligence has a heritability that's very high, almost as high as that of height. And there are few recent behavior genetic studies with identical twins versus fraternal twins showing that musical ability, creative dance ability, I've got some Mexican people exemplifying these abilities, Zamora, the chess player, grandmaster, exemplifying intelligence, Vargas, the singer, exemplifying musical ability, creative dance ability, Hernandez, artistic ability, Belkin, and humor styles, George Lopez, because I don't really know Mexican comedians that well. So all of these seem to be heritable. They're all influenced genetically, and that means they could all evolve under mate choice. And this is no surprise, because behavior genetics has shown that every trait that you can reliably measure is heritable. Sometimes the heritabilities are high, sometimes they're moderate, but everything's heritable. Happiness is heritable. If you want happy kids, marry a happy person. That's the best you can do. Empathy, altruism, aggression, leadership, economic behavior, risk-taking, novelty-seeking, forgetting to pull the ripcord on your parachute, consumer preferences, political attitudes, religiosity, the extent to which you believe in evolution itself versus you're religious, that's heritable. The risk of divorce, how warm you are to your kids, those are all heritable. The last couple of years, we wanted to push the limits of what behavior genetics could tell us about heritability. And we chose 2 ridiculous traits where we thought these things can't possibly be heritable, right? They don't make sense. So we looked at female orgasm rates. What's your percentage likelihood of having an orgasm if you're a woman and you're either having sex or you're masturbating? That was heritable, about 40%. So who your lover is depends a little bit, in predicting orgasm rate, but your genes also matter. Most recently, we've looked at the rates of teens, Australian teens, talking and texting on their mobile phones. How often do they send texts? How many minutes per week do they talk on their mobile phones? That also turned out to be heritable. That does not mean the genes for mobile phone use evolved, right? Because mobile phones have been around one generation. It does mean that traits that are there, like extroversion, outgoingness, influence mobile phone use. Interestingly, we were also able to show that some of the same genes that influence intelligence have a negative influence on how much you use your mobile phone. So intelligence is negatively correlated with mobile phone use, and you can use that to good effect if you're a parent of a teen. Say, what are you, stupid? So the heritability is there. How about the relationship between mating and creative behaviors generally? There's a great study by Vladis Griskevicius and colleagues. Took a bunch of students, divided them into two halves. Half of them get a mating prime, where they get shown a very attractive face, and then they write for 3 minutes about the ideal one-night stand or hookup, or the ideal casual date, or the ideal serious date, or the ideal committed relationship. The other half get a neutral prime, like they look at an attractive street, like Puebla, and they write for 3 minutes about what would be the ideal weather conditions for viewing that street. What happened is the men viewing the image of the woman got more creative on all the creativity tasks for any mating prime, whether it was for short-term mating, long-term mating, any kind of mating, they got more creative. The women only increased their creativity when they were imagining a committed relationship with a highly attractive guy. The women didn't bother becoming more creative if they were thinking about a one-night stand, partly because males aren't that choosy about creativity in one-night stands. It's also interesting that women at peak fertility in the cycle, in the menstrual cycle, around days 9 to 15 after menstruation begins, that's when women are at peak fertility, when if they have a short-term mate, they could pass on the genes potentially to their children. There is a distinctive psychology of female short-term mating that kicks into play mid-cycle. Women mid-cycle show stronger preferences for male traits that reveal good genes, such as height, muscles, masculine face and voice, dominance, the sort of things that Achilles showed. We've also shown, though, that women at peak fertility also show a little bit stronger preference for creativity versus wealth, like they might slightly prefer Del Toro to Slim Hellu in mid-cycle. There's also evidence that women show a little bit stronger preference for good sense of humor mid-cycle. Intelligence itself, there are no cycle effects on. Intelligence is always strongly preferred, actually both by males and females. It's also interesting that women at peak fertility are better able to attract males. So if they want one of those creative, good gene males, they're better able to get him, even if he's already in a relationship, because they display, mid-cycle, more attractive voices, sense, skin, nonverbal behavior, personalities, mental health, clothing, and interest in affairs than they do a week earlier or a week later in their cycle. We've also shown that if they work as lap dancers in gentlemen's clubs, they earn a lot more money mid-cycle, $70 an hour versus $50 an hour a week later versus $35 an hour if they're menstruating. So it's economically significant as well. That was my most infamous study, and we got the Ig Nobel Prize in economics for that one. This is my favorite study. We took a bunch of college students, sat them down, and asked them to do a bunch of verbal and drawing tasks, and to do them as if you're doing them to attract a mate, and we explicitly instructed them, be as creative as possible. One example task was write down 10 creative words to describe yourself in a singles ad to attract a mate. And then we had 6 other people rate the creativity of the responses. So rate 2,900 responses, which is kind of tedious. But anyway, the kinds of ratings that were given said the most attractive answers are things like, and these are real answers given by real University of New Mexico students. Some people said, I'm kaleidoscopic. I'm rambunctious. I'm ergonomic. I can be used without wrist strain. One person said dodecahedron, and they weren't a dodecahedron, but that's highly creative. One person said omnipotent, immortal, but I'm sure in a self-deprecating, ironic way. Responses rated as less creative were also more common responses. Things like nice hair, romantic, fun, outgoing, spiritual, etc. The kinds of things people typically write in singles ads are not creative and don't work, actually. Another verbal task was imagine you could be any kind of animal you wanted for a day. What kind of animal would you be? There, the highly creative responses were things like a spider monkey so my limbs would be highly mobile, a velociraptor to experience immense predatory power, a sea anemone, which is just a rare and imaginative response. Responses rated as less creative and that were much more common: cat, dog, bird. You can tell they're not as intelligent because the spider monkey gets the water. The cat doesn't get the water and its head is stuck. The dog leaping misses the tire entirely. And the bird, it gets the bread wrapped around its head and can't eat it. So we did an analysis of what predicts verbal creativity, and what we found was intelligence predicts it. No surprise. Although there actually aren't that many studies showing that intelligence predicts creativity, but also a personality trait called openness. Openness to experience. That means things like having an active imagination, aesthetic sensitivity, curiosity, variety seeking, novelty seeking. Political liberalism is associated with it, and of course, attending Ciudad de las Ideas. You're all highly open, just like Salvador Dali or Octavio Paz. The drawing tasks were even more fun, I think. On the left, a set of 4 drawings rated highly creative. On the right, drawings rated less creative. The upper left for each, we asked subjects to please draw an abstract symbol, pattern, or composition that represents the taste of pure, rich, dark chocolate. So there's abstract chocolate. This person wrote Hershey on a bar. The upper right is draw an abstract composition representing your childhood doing a favorite activity. Right? So abstract childhood happiness versus swing set, tricycle, bouncing ball. Right? They just can't be creative there or abstract. Down here, the lower left, particularly interesting, please draw an abstract symbol representing intense sexual desire and erotic yearning. Okay, desire, blank. And blank gets scored 0. And here it represents your soul, spirit, or essence. Anybody doing a conventional religious symbol, a cross, a Jewish star, Muslim crescent, gets scored fairly low on creativity there. And then the representational drawings, you get a similar kind of pattern. High creativity, please draw an animal that you admire for its speed, grace, or beauty. Cat, duck. Remember, these are 20-year-olds, not 3-year-olds. Please draw a tree that represents how you feel today. Nice windswept, semi-depressed tree versus unexpressive tree. Draw a house that must have been designed by a very imaginative architect in a foreign city, right? Sort of organicist architecture here versus even simpler than a bowerbird bower. And then an alien civilization on a distant planet, right? The architecture is not that different, but the drawing skill is quite different. And what you see here is drawing creativity is also predicted by intelligence, but it's even more strongly predicted by openness. So openness really matters quite a lot in art, but both of them matter a lot in both verbal and drawing creativity. We've also done studies on humor, where you ask subjects to take New Yorker cartoons from the magazine that have their captions stripped out and write captions for those cartoons, and then the captions are rated for how funny they are by other people. We also have them do 2 good vocabulary tests and reasoning tests to represent intelligence. Here, intelligence strongly predicts verbal humor, and we also ask them about short-term mating success. Things like how many sexual partners have you had in your life in the last week? How many times have you had 2 or more sexual partners in the same day? Things like that. And verbal humor also somewhat weakly predicts short-term mating success. And I, for some reason, have Victor Trujillo up there representing verbal humor and intelligence to some degree. Okay, I've got just a couple more slides to wrap this up. Why would we care about verbal creativity or drawing creativity or anything else that represents general intelligence? I think general intelligence is really important because it reveals good genes to a large degree. I mentioned already the heritability of intelligence in adults is about 0.8, but it's not dependent on just one gene or just 10 genes. Intelligence isn't dependent on just 10,000 genes. The most recent estimates are there are at least 500,000 sites in the genome across all chromosomes where minor mutations at those sites slightly reduce your intelligence, right? So a given mutation might reduce your IQ by 1,000th of 1 point, and then they accumulate to determine your overall intelligence. And we found that intelligence correlates positively with body symmetry, with brain size, with the quality of semen count and semen motility, also, of course, with school grades, job performance, physical health, mental health, longevity. And general intelligence correlates negatively with minor nerve abnormalities, like having a bad response in terms of your eye reflex, or minor physical abnormalities, like having a club thumb, a shortened, thickened thumb, like model Megan Fox has. So intelligence is associated with a lot of good things. Final slide. The point here is evolution is not blind and dumb. Ever since the evolution of sexual reproduction 500 million years ago, through mate choice, we've been shaping the evolution of our species, of all lineages. Humans in particular have shaped our own evolution for things like art, creativity, music, language, for thousands of generations. We have all the ingredients that we needed to do that: heritable variation, mate choice, traits revealing good genes. And what I want to emphasize now is that all the mate choices that you all make are essentially votes on the future evolution of our species. Do we evolve into them or them or them or them? It's up to us. And because we're part of evolution, we drive the mate choice process, it's important for us to acknowledge that. I'm done. Thank you.
Bravo.